Live and direct, live and a date no jive.
Legalize it.
So how much can a koala bear? Koala bear, koala bear. Koala bear. Barry pulls a joint out of his pocket. Bill says, "Great, Barry, a reefer."
Hi, welcome back. It's the Koala podcast. And in this episode, I'm down in South Africa talking to lawyer Ricky Stone, who's environmental lawyer first, but he also discusses a range of other sort of what people might term as activist conversations in law, specifically cannabis. And in this one, actually, we're going to talk about psychedelics. Ricky is getting involved in a couple of cases, or at least one in South Africa, revolving around psychedelics. I'm not 100% sure what the actual details are, so I got on the phone and Ricky said he would be very happy to sort of widen that conversation. And this is especially for our US listeners, for you to understand that outside the US, there are conversations about psychedelics in law. Most of you will be aware of what's happening in Australia, but I doubt very many will be aware that there are these sorts of conversations in South Africa. Ricky, welcome to the Koala podcast. Thanks for your time. What brought you to this case, or how much work have you done in psychedelics and law in South Africa over the past few years?
Good morning, Sean, and thank you so much for hosting me. It's really a privilege to finally be on the Koala podcast, and greetings to all your listeners. So, look, I suppose, thank you for describing me as an environmental lawyer. So many people describe me as a cannabis lawyer, which I take huge offense to, because I say there's no such thing as a cannabis lawyer, right? Cannabis is just one plant of thousands. And it just fits neatly into my environmental law practice. So, I suppose how I got into work around psilocybin as a psychedelic.
And specifically, is it psilocybin you're talking about, or did you? Because I'm not aware of the range of compounds in Africa at all. So is psilocybin leading the conversation because that's what the economy wants, or is it just the easiest way to discuss psychedelics as an entry point?
Well, look, I think let me put it this way. There's probably two aspects of this work that I'm involved in. One is, say, purely legal, which is constitutional litigation, right? And then on the other hand, there's a range of kind of advocacy and policy related work that I'm also involved in and leading, that has to deal with fungi as a kingdom, right? Which is kind of like totally unacknowledged in most legal systems around the world, and which is quite embarrassing to me as an environmental lawyer. We've got some of the strongest biodiversity legislation in the world, but it only regulates, protects everything above ground, not the unseen ecological infrastructure, right? So, and I think there's two aspects kind of to the work that I'm involved in. The constitutional litigation is almost always something that is reactive to an arrest, usually. So my client is a elderly granny, a gogo in her 80s. She's a retired trauma counselor, cancer survivor who only 2 decades ago, in her 60s, after losing her husband and going through a traumatic ordeal with cancer and the grieving process of losing her partner, became very depressed. And this is a woman, very religious, came out the church, never touched alcohol, never touched tobacco, never touched any drugs, so to speak, or call them. And nothing helped her. No pharmaceuticals helped her depression. She was clinically diagnosed, and a friend suggested she try psilocybin, magic mushrooms, which she did in a friend's garden, and it was such a transformational experience. She stopped taking her pharmaceuticals and realized that working with psilocybin could bring profound benefits to many thousands, if not millions, of South Africans. So she started kind of, pioneering in the shadows, so kind of workshops, retreats, supervised psychedelic experiences, healing experiences, and then was arrested.
And she was arrested. She was arrested for holding an event, possession of psilocybin. What?
Yeah, so she was arrested for possession, for use, for dealing in trading. She was supplying it.
And do we know how the police became aware of what she was doing?
Yeah, it's a sad but interesting story because so one of the participants, an esteemed professor at a leading university, came for one of these healing experiences and freaked out, for lack of better words, during the ceremony, charged out the property, ran to the police station while under the effects of psilocybin, and opened up a criminal case. The police went to Monica Cromhout's house, still mid-ceremony, and arrested her. So that's how it happened. It wasn't like there was an undercover operation. It was literally somebody, I think, whose anxiety in the moment got the better of them. Yeah. Which has been, I say, interesting, because that individual obviously has deep regret for their actions, and has now been somewhat instrumental in certain support offered towards the legal case, non-financial support, to be clear. So that's the genesis of this case, is an arrest. So then a High Court application to stay any criminal prosecutions pending the outcome of a constitutional challenge against the psilocybin prohibition in South Africa, where psilocybin's prohibited, like no other fungi are even regulated or prohibited, but much like plants such as cannabis, treated as a drug under our Drugs Act, and then a scheduled substance under our Medicines Act. So when it comes to psilocybin, Schedule 7, in essence, no medical benefits and only to be used for scientific purposes. So same category as heroin and fentanyl, and hence why we've charged forward with a really comprehensive constitutional case.
And what, under the current legislation, in simple terms, what's she up for if they find her guilty?
Well, look, I mean, we'll, I suppose, hypothetically, minimum sentence of 10 years in prison, right? But I mean, it wouldn't get there. There's already a stay of the criminal prosecutions. And of course, I think the reform writings on the wall, it's also not, we've got very settled cannabis jurisprudence in South Africa as a result of the privacy judgment of September 2018. Although I like to say that, I mean, it's strong jurisprudence, but it's not our litmus paper or litmus test, so to speak. That case really had a few holes in its bucket, led by lay people, no disrespect. And the outcome really followed kind of the case that was put before the court. And, I think there's some hard lessons for us to learn as we're learning.
So the constitutional challenge, are you looking to get a similar outcome as the cannabis in terms of it's a right of privacy, or is there a rescheduling conversation? How you
not necessarily rescheduling. So there are rescheduling discussions, but they're going, I'll say, in the advocacy, therapeutic law reform channel outside of the legal proceedings. So I mean, to be very clear, I mean, this is not a case for medical access. This is, to put it simply, a case about consciousness, right? That as an adult, you have what we say is a right to cognitive liberty and sovereignty over
this is a very interesting conversation, because as we were discussing in our preamble, you're attending an event that I'm putting on at Cape Town University, and one of the lawyers I've got coming out from the UK has been talking about cognitive liberty and psychedelics and across a range of compounds for the last 20 years. And he believes that cognitive liberty legislation should be sitting at, international court level, UN level, and national level in every jurisdiction on the planet, and written with language that isn't biased as against whatever we want, consumers, users, patients, whatever language we want to use. So, I mean, it's very interesting. This conversation is popping up. I've seen it in a number of places only in the last 6 or 8 months. And this particular phrase, cognitive liberty.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, I mean, this is a first case that's advancing the concept within our constitutional jurisprudence. But it's not, I mean, this is not novel, right? Our argument is really that cognitive liberty is already embedded within our constitution. It lives within the rights to dignity, to equality, to bodily and psychological integrity, to freedom of belief, freedom of consciousness. It's really superficial to even think that human rights end at the skin. They must extend deep into the inner domains of the mind. And we've got so much constitutional jurisprudence just on the right to privacy and how, the aspects of consciousness and the realms of kind of the inner feelings of what you determine to be your private space that clearly already show that your rights don't end at your skin. They indeed extend all the way into your mind. So, we kind of position this case carefully as not asking something radical or totally novel of the court. It's really following a similar path to what happened with cannabis, and particularly, and this is also an important part of this case, because so much of the discussion out there around psychedelics and psilocybin kind of starts in the Amazon, in Peru, in the Americas, right? But, so what we're showing as well through this case is really that a lot of the origin story, and there's fascinating research which is going to be released in the coming months out of South Africa, obviously constrained to speak too much about it, but that definitively shows that even our first people, the Koya and San, the so-called Bushmen, with their renowned rock art for 10,000 years have been using psilocybin, and this is reflected in their rock art and within a few hundred meters of a lot of these caves that contain this rock art. You see indigenous Southern African psilocybin growing abundantly in nature. So, as a mentor and good friend of mine, Darren LeBaron from the UK likes to say, fungi is the real AI. This is the ancestral intelligence. So, the aspects about the origin stories and how this is really, it's not a technical legal challenge, it's a cultural challenge. It's really about, and I think this is one of the important messages, is that psilocybin and all mushrooms indeed, the medicinal non-psychedelic ones, help you remember. So I think, once we remember that humanity have been using fungi and especially psychedelic fungi for millennia, then we can start rewriting and reworking our law. So accepting that this is nothing new. We're actually saying we've made a mistake here over the last century, at least when it comes to drug policy and how it's been regulated. Let's kind of go back to the beginning, lean on indigenous and ancestral wisdom, and then we can truly, I believe, unlock the major benefits that psilocybin and other psychedelic compounds have to offer. You ask, I mean, South Africa, we've got about 1,000 medicinal plants, right? And fungi obviously are not part of the plant kingdom. So we've got plants that contain psychedelic compounds that science don't yet know about. They're entirely lawful. They are unregulated because they've never fallen under United Nations convention or any other international instruments, because they only exist in South Africa and they're only known to our indigenous people. who continue to use them as they have been for centuries in indigenous traditional health practices, especially to heal mental health ailments. So yeah, I know, fascinating work to be doing, right at the southern tip of Africa.
Absolutely, and it's so fascinating. We've almost run out of time, but it's a sort of perfect way to end prior to the case, and then hopefully when we come out the other end, we can have a longer discussion of what the ramifications of the case were, or no, will be, or are when we see the results, and what that means in the next set of discussions, both in South Africa and also internationally. So, Ricky Stone, environmental lawyer, thank you very much for being on the Karma Koala podcast.
It's a real pleasure to have been here, Sean, and looking forward to that discussion after the hearing. Thanks again.
Live and direct, live and I take no jive.
Legalize it. So how much can a koala bear? Koala bear, koala bear. Koala bear. Barry pulls a joint out of his pocket. Bill says, great, Barry, a reefer.